Hello, welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to explain a bit more about the modes on a DSLR camera. I did go into some detail about the modes in the last video on exposure, but I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail in this video about the different modes on the camera. So my favorite mode on the camera is the manual mode. And the reason why the manual mode is my favorite is because it gives me complete control of all the settings, and that's what I like. Because I've now considered myself experienced at using a DSLR camera. I know what settings I need for each particular scene or image I'm taking, so I can just quickly find those settings in manual mode. And the more experience you get in using the DSLR and taking images with the manual mode, you won't need the other settings on the camera. Well, you won't need the aperture priority probably, and you probably won't need the shutter speed mode. So I'm just going to explain about the manual mode first, and just go into a little bit more detail about that. So the manual mode means manual. It means you can manually change all of the settings in the camera. So if we have a look at the screen on the back there, so we can with this top button here in the manual mode, we can change the shutter speed. So if we just have a look at the live view here, so if I turn this button here, I can change the shutter speed like that. If I turn the other dial, this dial here, I can change the aperture like that. If I press on this top button, the ISO button, I can change the ISO like that. Or you can also change the settings by touching the screen, and you could slide that along to whatever one you wanted and then press set. You can also change your aperture pressing on it and changing it like that. So I'll put it on the widest one. You can just put it there and then press set, and then you can change your shutter speed as well by sliding this along like this. And you can see by sliding it along, you're going to change the brightness of the image as well, just by looking through the live view. So you can change your ISO, you can change your aperture, and you can change your shutter speed yourself. You don't have to rely on the camera changing those for you, you do the changing. So that's what I like about the manual mode. With the aperture priority mode, when you turn it, it tells you that you can it changes the aperture and it changes the ISO in this mode, and it decides what shutter speed to give you. So by turning this top dial, it changes. If you watch the screen there, you'll see that it changes the aperture, the top dial, not the shutter speed, changes the aperture. And if you turn this side dial, it doesn't do anything. And if you set your ISO to automatic and you turn this side dial, it will change the brightness of your image just by turning this side dial. You can see the little bar moving on the scale here by turning that side dial. That's if you've got your ISO on automatic like that. If you haven't got your ISO on automatic, if you've got it on say 100, you can see it changes the shutter speed. You can see there, changing the shutter speed. So it's telling me if I want to have that balance at 100 aperture, I've got to take it over 2 seconds or 2.5 seconds with that aperture at 9. So if I turn that aperture down to 2.8, it's now telling me I can take that, but it would have to be a quarter of a shutter speed. Well, As I explained in the last video on exposure, if you want to take an image that's only a fifth shutter speed, you're going to get camera shake if you're hand holding it. So it would need to be on a tripod. So if you're taking your images with a tripod, you can quite safely use the aperture priority mode, because you're not, it doesn't really matter as long as your subject's not moving and you've got your camera on a tripod. You can use the aperture priority mode. So if you were taking pictures of, say, food or products, you could use the aperture priority mode, and then you can choose what aperture you wanted. So I've got this camera on a GorillaPod tripod, so I can have a low shutter speed. And if I wanted, I've got it in aperture priority mode. You can see there the AV at the top there, and to tell me I'm in aperture priority mode. I've got the aperture set at the widest setting at 2.8 here. I've got a balance in the center, so the exposure is going to be correct, and I've got it on 100 ISO. So if I half press the shutter, you can see it's going to take it at 1/6 of a second. I've also got it set on timer, because if I press that shutter button, I can cause shake of the camera just by pressing the button. And because it's on such a low shutter speed, it is best if you've got it on a low shutter speed and you haven't got the remote control attached, to have it on a timer, so that when you press the shutter you can cause shake, but when you take your hand away, by the time it takes the image, it's not shaking anymore. So to focus on one particular piece, you can just click on the piece and you can see it's automatically focused on that piece, and then you can take your image and it should blur the background. So you can see it blurred the background there. So if we have a look at that image there, and if we scroll in to have a proper look, you can see it's got this image sharp and it's got the background blurred. So if we wanted to take a different, if we wanted to focus on a different piece, let's say we wanted to focus on one of the pieces at the back, it would blur the piece at the front. So this is how the depth of field, you can change the depth of field just by choosing on what to focus on. So I can have actually this piece at the front blurred if I choose the piece at the back. So I'm just going to take a photograph of that now. And if we have a look at that image a bit closer, you can see, if we zoom in, the piece at the back there is focused, but this piece here is not focused because it's blurred it out. So it depends on, it's not just a case of the wide aperture keeping the things in view at the front, which it will do automatically unless you change the focusing point. So if you change the focusing point, let's just say I change the focusing point to this piece, it would automatically focus on that piece, and then other pieces will be blurred. So you can choose, like if it was a part of your image that you wanted to be focused the most, you can just choose where you want it to focus on. Or if you might want to have this piece in focus, you can just touch where you want it focused. There's spot AF. If you look through the viewfinder, you can then choose where you want to have that little square. You can also move that little square by using this, you know, like a joystick. It's not really a joystick, but you can just move it along the screen like this and decide where you want it focused. So if I focus on that one, so I'll have that piece sharp and then the other pieces won't be sharp. So that's with a wide aperture. But if you wanted all the pieces in focus, like I showed you with in the last video, you would need to increase the aperture. So if I increase the aperture to say 16, that would probably ensure most of the pieces were in focus. Or you could increase it even further to say 20. If I go 16, I'll just focus it on the piece at the front. So it looks like, when I was explaining before, you can't rely on the live view giving you the depth of field. You have to use the depth of field preview button. So if I press the depth of field preview button, you can see all the pieces are going to be in focus. But if I don't press the depth of field preview button, it looks like the images are going to be blurred in the background. Let us take the image and see what happens. So it was a long shutter speed, and that's because it was a higher aperture. So you can see there all the pieces are in focus with that aperture. And that was aperture 18, and it took the image for 6 seconds. So that's the aperture priority mode. So the shutter priority mode, it lets you control the shutter speed. So you can turn the dial for the shutter speed like this, and it just changes the aperture for you. So you decide what shutter speed you want, and it automatically changes the aperture for you, which is, it might be something you might want to think about if you're outdoors and you're taking pictures of sports or something like that. You know, just by changing the dial, it changes the aperture for you. If it's flashing, it means it's not going to take the image, because that's the lowest aperture it can go to. So it's not going to work, it's telling you. Really, if I was designing this camera, I would have the ISO flashing as well, because really you should be changing your ISO if you can't get your aperture low enough. If I put the ISO on automatic, it wouldn't flash, because now I've got the ISO automatic. It might be best having your ISO automatic if you're using like the shutter speed mode or the aperture priority mode. The next mode, the program mode, so that's it sets your shutter speed and your aperture automatically. It's a bit like the automatic setting in a way. So if I turn the dial, it turns the aperture and the shutter speed at the same time. You can see there. But it wants to keep it balanced. And it won't let me go any further because it wants to keep that balance. So what it's saying to me, oh, so you wanted more than a 1/6 of a second? Well, I'm sorry, but that's the widest aperture I can do, and you want it on 100 ISO, so I'm sorry, but I'm not going to let you move it any further. So its aim is to keep the image exposed correctly. So if you wanted to have the ISO on automatic, like that, it's not an automatic. It's still wanting to keep the ISO at 100. I think this is the program mode. Wants to keep the ISO at 100, doesn't let you change it. Let's see if I can change the ISO to 200. If you've got to change the ISO manually. It doesn't look like the automatic ISO works, but you can change the ISO manually. It's not a program I use, but if you're a beginner, you might want to decide to use that instead. Then you've got the automatic mode, which to apply effects, press the Creative Assist button. So you can choose, I mean, this chooses your, so to apply effects, you have to choose the Creative Assist button here, so you can, so you can actually choose a background blur with that, or you can choose the exposure as well, lets you do that or that. So it makes it easy for you, really. This is new. For automatic settings, you didn't normally get this capability of changing any kind of settings in the you can change the saturation. So in the automatic setting, you can press the creative assist, and then you can change it to whether you want it vivid, soft, warm. I mean, you can do this in the JPEG afterwards as well, use the creative assist, but you can also do it in the automatic mode. So you can change the blurriness by turning this as well. So what it's doing is it's changing your aperture. So if you want it more blurry, you can have it there, or if you want it not blurry, you can have it there. So I'll have it more blurry, so you can see it's set the aperture at 2.8 there, and it's put the ISO to 1600 and at 1/100th of a second. So it doesn't really need to be 1/100th of a second. Do you know why it doesn't need to be 1/100th of a second? Because the subject's not moving. So really that setting could be changed, and I could have a lower ISO. So this is why the automatic setting is not ideal, because it's telling me I've got to have noise in my image when I don't need noise in my image, because I could really have the shutter speed low because I've got it on a tripod. I don't need that noise in my image. So this is why the automatic setting is not ideal. And then the scene modes. Let's just have a look at the different scene modes. So to look at the scene modes, you press the Q button, and then you can click on there, and then you can use the scroll wheel to scroll through them. So portrait mode, for close-up portraits, backgrounds are blurred, subjects stand out. So if the background's going to be blurred and the subject's going to stand out, you can guess what setting that's going to be. And can you remember what I said about people, what kind of shutter speed you need? I said you would need 100 or more, didn't I? Roughly 100 or more. And I said for the if you want the background blurred, it's best to have it on the widest setting on your lens, which in this case is 2.8. So I'm guessing, I haven't touched the half shutter button yet, but I'm guessing it should be around 100 shutter speed and 2.8 aperture. So I'm going to half press the shutter. It's 125th of a second and 2.8 aperture, and it's put the ISO up to 2000. It's telling me to use the flash. So if I use the flash and then take the image, it still kept it at 1000 ISO. If I was using a flash, I wouldn't have needed to be on it. I've changed the ISO to, it's not available. So you're not allowed to change the ISO in the portrait mode. So let's go back to the other settings. We've got group photo. So if we half press the button, we've got 7.1 aperture, 1/60th of a second, and it's put the ISO up to 3200. Obviously the ISO is high in this scenario because I'm indoors and it's low light in this room. If I was outdoors, that ISO might be a lot better. But most group photos I would think would be taken indoors anyway, so you will probably need a flash if you were going to take indoor photographs and have the flash bouncing off the ceiling, so you're not getting in people's eyes and causing red eye. I'll talk about flash in another video. So that was the group, and then we've got landscape. Can you guess what aperture is going to be for the landscape? It probably changes depending on the light, but let me just half press it and see what we get. We get 5.6, so it's like mid-range aperture, and it's telling me to take it at a low shutter speed, and it's increased the ISO because of the low light. So that's the landscape. Can you guess what the sports would be? Somebody running. Remember I said slow walking would be 100 shutter speed roughly. If somebody's running, it's going to be a faster shutter speed. Can you have a guess what this was going to be? Somebody running. Let me have a look. I'll half press it, and we've got 1/400th of a second, and it's set the aperture 2.8 and 6400 shutter speed. I'll just go and take that off autofocus because it's noisy, the camera, when it's trying to focus. So for the sports, 1/400th of a second, 2.8 aperture, and it's put it at 6400 ISO, and that's because we're indoors. If you were outdoors, obviously that, and it was better lighting, that ISO is going to be a lot better. So the next scene we've got is kids. For shooting kids in motion, continuous shooting with subject kept in focus. So it's 2/50th of a second. I think really the shutter speed is important for children that are moving. The ISO has gone up to 1600 and it's kept it at a wide aperture 2.8. And this is panning, like if you were panning a car. I'll explain about panning in another video. So this setting for panning is 1/30th of a second, which you're probably thinking to yourself, well, a car goes fast. But with panning is you've got to follow the car with the camera. And the ISO is 1000 and the aperture 4. So the next one, close up of a flower, like a macro image. Can you guess what kind of settings you would need for a flower? If you want to say blur the background or have the background sharp, you might want to change the aperture depending on what kind of flower picture you want. I am going to do a video about photographing flowers. So half press it, what do we get? We get 1/60th of a second, 2.8 and 1600. Now it's kept a wide aperture but it's increased the shutter speed. Why do you think they might increase the shutter speed for a flower? Because if it was indoors it wouldn't really matter that much, but outdoors the wind moves the flower. So the wind would move the flower would be swaying backwards and forwards, and if the flower's moving, it's like a person moving. You have to have a faster shutter speed. So this is, let's just go, food. Culinary photography makes food look fresh and vibrant. So what settings have we got? 1/100th of a second, 3.5 and 1600. Night portrait. We've got 3.5, 1/60th of a second in ISO 800. And you can't change the ISO. You can't change the ISO. It stays at 800 on a night scene. And that's because the noise does look more prominent in night scenes. And then we've got handheld night scene. It takes 4 consecutive shots and it uses the flash when shooting subjects in night scenes. So if you weren't photographing a person or anything, you could just take the image without using the flash. But what it does is it takes 4 consecutive shots. So let's just do that then. So it takes it at 5.6. It gives like a mid-range kind of aperture. It's taken it at 1/100th of a second. It's increased the ISO to 1600. So it's taken a long time because it's having to compile those images together. So it's taken 4 shots and it's compiled them together to give this image. I might try that actually. I've never tried the night scene. I think it might be one of the scenes I might actually try using. I haven't really used the scenes, but That sounds good, because it takes 4 images together and then it compiles them. It obviously takes them at different exposures and then puts them together. So you get a better exposed image if you're outdoors at night. And then the last one is backlight control. Retain more detail in bright or dark areas of high contrast scenes. Take 3 consecutive shots. So if you had a bright light behind somebody or a window, it would take 3 shots like that, and then it would compile them together. And because it's low light, it takes a bit of time. So the image that compiled is that one. So that's all of the scenes. So that was the scene mode, and then you've got the creative filters. We did go into great detail about the creative filters in the exposure video, so please go back and check that video for information about that. And the customization, remember you can customize your video to your favorite settings for particular images. So I chose to use the high shutter speed. So you know, I decided to use the high shutter speed for birds in flight for my customized setting. Please go back to the exposure video to have a look at those, how to do that. So there was C2 and C1 to customize. And then we have the bulb mode. So with the bulb mode, so exposure continues while shutter button is pressed. So if you were taking, say, fireworks or stars, is what the pictures are showing here, which helps you. So if you remember the shutter speed, can you remember what the longest shutter speed is in manual mode? So let's just go back and have a look at manual mode. And if we make the shutter speed, the longest shutter speed, so 30 seconds. So 30 seconds is the longest shutter speed you can get with the manual mode. So if you want more than 30 seconds, you need to use the bulb mode. So that is for very low light, like stars, or if you want it longer than 30 seconds, you would use the bulb mode. So with the bulb mode, if you've got it on bulb like that, if you want to take an image, say if I wanted to take an image of there, because I've got the aperture set at 18 here, the ISO I've got at 200, but as long as I keep that button pressed, it's going to take the image for as long as I keep it pressed. So you can, this is the shutter button I mean, so you can take images for, you can see it's flashing, telling me my battery's nearly dead. So you can take images for, you know, just a few seconds if you want. If I press on that bulb mode now and just hold it, or I've got it on, I'll take it off. So to take it off the timer, you click on the Q, button, remember, and then go on timer, and then I'm just going to change it to 1 shot. So if I wanted to take an image of this chessboard over, say, 3 seconds, I just press the button down and hold it. So 1, 2, 3, then leave go, and it's taken an image. If I wanted to do it longer than that, so press the button down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then release it. You can see that image is far too bright now because I'm blurry because I moved, and I haven't got it on a tripod. So let's just change the, you can change the aperture, but obviously the shutter speed is however long you press it for. So you can just do it quick if you want, or you can just hold it in for as long as you want. So if you're willing to sit there and hold the button down for 40 seconds, it'll take that image over 40 seconds, and then the image will finish when you leave go. But obviously if you move, it's going to blur the image. Like if we have a look at that. You can see that's all blurred because I was moving it. Now remember I told you about the remote. So to put the remote, you can use a wired remote, which you can put in there. So I've got this remote here. So this remote is by a company called Newer. They are quite cheap. You can buy them on Amazon. And if you do buy a remote, make sure you do get one that fits your particular camera. So this connection is this. Some of the connections are completely different, so make sure you do get the right one for your camera. So with this timer, I will go into how to use a timer in another video properly, but if you want to use it on bulb mode and you don't want to have to keep pressing the shutter button, I'll show you how you can do it using the timer. So what you do is you put your little connection in there like that, and then with the timer button, if you've got this on bulb mode, you can see there I've got that on bulb mode, you can see. So with your timer button, I'll just move the camera a bit. With the timer button, with this one, you can either press and hold it for the length of time you want it, or you can push it up. If you push it up, it locks it in place, and then you can see the timer's ticking, and it's got release flashing, so that's telling you it's your job to release it when you're ready to release it. So when you're ready to release it, you just pull that back. So it's been going for, let's just go more than 30 seconds. You can see the light is on the camera because it's busy taking the photograph at the moment. So it's gone for 37 seconds, 38, 39, 40, and I'm just going to release it just by pulling that back, and now it's finished taking the image. And if we have a look at that image, you can see it's overexposed because it's been ticking away for 40 seconds. So that's how you would use a timer in using the bulb mode, or you can just press it and hold it. So if I just press it and hold it for a few seconds, you can do that. So I'm just going to press, and I'm just going to hold it. I haven't got it locked, and then I just leave go of it when I want to stop. There, I've left go. So that's how you can do that using a remote. So very cheap to buy, handy to have. Every time I buy one of these, my back comes off. So I end up having to tape the batteries in place. You can use it without batteries. The batteries are mainly for if you want to set the interval timer, but you can actually use this button without battery. So if your batteries run out, you can still do the bulb mode with this, I think. I might be wrong. So this particular model is the EZA-C1. It takes AAA batteries, this one. There's also where you can set the timer using the menu. So if we go to bulb timer, you can have that on. So you can enable. So let's just see which it's on. It's on the number 5 menu, the red menu, number 5, and then you go bulb timer enable, and then you can set it. So you can enable, and then you can set it. If you click on there, and then you can set, so you can change the timer on here. So you just click on it and you can go up or down. So let's just say I go down to enter hours, minutes or seconds. So hours, minutes, seconds. So let's just, so that's minutes I'm setting. Oh dear me. So we don't want it to go for like hours, do we? So these are the seconds. So let's just set it for 3 seconds. And then if I press the button, now I'm going to press the button now. I can use this if I want to. Press the button on here, or I can press the button on the shutter button on the camera. 1, 2, 3, there. So it's took it for 3 seconds, like you set it for. So if you haven't got a remote, you can also set the timer using the timer in the menu 5 in the red menu buttons. So I'm just going to disable that now because I don't want that on. So that is the bulb setting. So we've gone through the settings now. We've gone through the bulb, we've gone through manual, aperture priority, shutter speed priority, program mode, automatic mode, scene mode, creative filter mode, customization 2 mode, customization 1 mode. So those are all the modes on the camera. So thank you for watching this video. Until the next one, bye for now.